afternoon, everyone. First, I want Belle to stand up. Yes, please. Stand up. Yes. Okay, this is Belle. In 2012, she heard me speak. And as I said, uh, I don't really like to speak at other conferences. I like to speak in my own. And Stuart had convinced me to speak. And after I spoke, I was like so relieved. And I went to hide in the ladies' room. I was there for 30 minutes, resting and doing my email. And I come out, and there's two young ladies waiting for me. And Belle was one of them. And she said, it's really, really important for you to speak because it's important for your messages. So I want you to know I had to change my flight because she made me feel guilty, okay, because I was going to leave at 1 o'clock. So if I'm great, you can give me the credit. If I'm horrible, blame it on her. You've read in the books, the president, CEO, trustee of the Wallace Coulter Foundation. So what on earth did this foundation do? It is the biggest funder of the Asian American Pacific Islander community in the United States. So in the last 5 years that I've been involved, since the 2010 census, we have distributed more than $50 million. However, that's not enough. So in 2014, I decided to focus on civic engagement. And why is that? Because this community, 20 years ago, there was a report that this community received less than 0.4% of billions and billions of dollars that is given away by mainstream foundations. Last year, there was another report. Now this community that's grown to be 20 million, that's less than 0.3% of all foundation giving. And I thought, why is that? Because I really don't know. I didn't grow up with this community. I don't understand all the issues of this community. But I thought perhaps maybe the greater American mainstream community doesn't really think a whole lot about this community. So I'll go back because many people think that somehow I was born fully grown as the president of this foundation. I really do have origins. I was a child. I did have a corporate history as well. Each and every one of you, I guarantee, has benefited from Wallace Coulter's technology. He is the benefactor of my foundation. And without him, there would be no such thing as an automated blood test. There were manual blood tests, but with his invention and his innovation and his entrepreneurship, he built and created a market that did not exist. And he made blood cell testing affordable and accessible to the world. And why is that? Because it really doesn't matter what you have. If you have a headache and you break your leg or anything else, what does the doctor do? First thing, a blood test. It is the most prescribed medical test in the world. And if he had not invented and standardized it, we would all not be here today. In fact, with Walter, there wouldn't be all these kinds of tests reference to cancer or infectious diseases or special conditions if it weren't for the blood tests. So prior to the foundation, I came to the United States in 1952. And that time, the population of the Asian community was 200,000 in the United States, primarily Chinese and Japanese, 20,000 only in New York. So you can understand when I say to people, I didn't grow up with Chinese, I didn't grow up with Asians, there was no such word as Asian. Basically, my mother and I came after communist China had closed its doors, and we basically left with the clothes in our back, coming to a new land. My mother, of course, spoke no English. She was 23 years old, and my father was a seaman, but he had joined the U.S. Army when the war broke out because he was a seaman in the British ship, and that was something he was always proud of, that he was a U.S. soldier. This is my father in a uniform. The previous picture, by the way, for those of you who go to Shanghai, it didn't always look like a concrete jungle the way it is today. These are pictures that actually Wallace took when he was there. He was stationed in the Far East, Shanghai, Hong Kong, Macau, Indonesia, Singapore for 3 years. And then he left basically when the war broke out. It's a very interesting story, actually. My father knew my mother. He's 8 years older. Somehow when she was in her early teens, and I guess they were at some kind of dinner together, and he was criticizing her for eating so slow. And somebody said, "You shouldn't criticize her. She might be your wife one day." That's what happens when you criticize people, okay? So we came over in 1952, my mother and I. My father had been in the States for quite a long time. And you can imagine how hard it was. We are, quote, the original immigrants. We came with no money. My mother and my father didn't have any education whatsoever. And we came where there was no support organization in the United States. There's no clinics, there were no legal services, there were no social services. There was nothing that could help new immigrants into this country. So the reason it's important for you to see this is because evidently I had an attitude, okay? So, and I don't know how many pictures after that, I always seem to have my hand like this. But I think in a way, because I was an only child. I was an only child for 7 years. My closest sister is 7 years younger. I think when you're an only child, you sort of understand that you have to have a little bit of an attitude because otherwise you wouldn't accomplish anything, okay? So that was my high school picture just to prove that I did graduate from high school. But the other thing is, what are influences in your life that make you who you are? Well, several things that I think from my childhood that's important to share with you. So we came over in 1952. I was 5 years old. In that winter, January, February, we lived in an apartment in New York City. My father was out there as a seaman, so we were alone. My mother had given birth, so there was 1954, I guess, in the winter, and the heater broke down in this little apartment. Well, she didn't speak English. She asked a Chinese neighbor to go tell the landlord that the heater had broken down. We have a brand new baby. And when you hear about people in cities when they have no heat, we heated it with the stove, the gas stove, and the oven being on. So 2 days, nobody came to fix it. So my mother takes me screaming and kicking to the landlord, this big white dude, okay? And she's yelling at him in Chinese, and she's yelling at me to tell me that I better be translating properly, yelling at him in Chinese. That showed me that basically from then on, I was going to be the spokesman for this family. And I didn't realize that. So you know how many immigrants today, children, are translating and explaining and describing for their parents because they don't speak the language? So in a couple years, we moved to, that was a very bad experience. So my mother demanded that my father quit being a seaman. And I don't think I realized what he gave up until much later in my golden age, which was when he was a seaman. There were a lot of Asians being seamen, so he wasn't by himself. He wasn't alone. But when she asked him to give it up because we had too many kids, he wound up being a waiter in the Catskill Mountain area, which was a beautiful place to live and grow up because it was safe, beautiful, no pollution, beautiful weather and everything else. But I didn't realize then he was the only Chinese waiter. And he had a horrible stuttering problem, which was why he didn't really speak that much to us because he was always stuttering and uncomfortable, embarrassed. He worked 16 hours a day anyway. So I know that he was probably prejudiced, discriminated, isolated, ostracized, made fun of, ridiculed, because my brother, as he grew up, was always telling us of all the fights he had to get into every week because of all the ridicule that my father faced, being the only Chinese waiter with a stuttering job. So when we moved into this town, I was 9 years old. My mother was dressing me, and she said to me, "We are the only Chinese family in this town. If you're stupid, they will think all Chinese are stupid. If you're smart, they will think all Chinese are smart. And you have sisters and brothers coming up after you." I'm sure you understand that was the last day of my childhood. Ever since then, I haven't had any fun. So, one of the things, when I was living in New York and we had, I had kindergarten, first grade, and second grade, there must have been some other Asians in school. But when I came to this little town of 2,500 people, there were no Chinese, there were no Asians. I was the first. You can imagine it wasn't a lot of fun. My very first year, the whole year, I would go to the cafeteria for lunch, and if I sat down, people would walk away. If I went and joined a group, they would all turn. People would not share their books with me. People wouldn't talk to me. I was like isolated and ostracized and depressed and withdrawn. So I'm sure at one day it probably was getting really bad. So I came home and I was crying. So my mother's like, "Why are you crying?" And I go, "Everybody hates me. I don't understand why everybody hates me. I didn't do anything. I wasn't nasty or mean. Why do they all hate me?" You know, kids can be very nasty and mean. She said, very simply, "Because you're different." And I want you to know that one little phrase, "because you're different," helped me carry me throughout my career. Because I was always first, or I was always the only Chinese, the only Asian, the only woman, the only executive, whatever. Explained to me, and it prepared me, and it was okay that I was excluded. And it was okay that I was prejudice and discrimination because I knew why. Kids have to have a reason why. So after that, I decided, okay, no one's going to pick me. Every Tuesday and Thursday, I have physical education. No one was going to pick me. Do you know how sad it is for a kid to be left out of everything? So I decided, fine, no one's going to pick me anyway. So I'm going to be so good at all these sports that I'll do the picking. So I joined every team there was: baseball, basketball, volleyball, hockey, track and field, gymnastics, everything. And I want you to know, ladies and gentlemen, if you have children, please, please have them do team sports. I know of no other mechanism and vehicle that builds leadership, strategy, teamwork, knowing how to fail, knowing how to win, and being gracious about it. And I guarantee you there is no CEO or chairman of any corporate 500 company that hasn't been a leader in team sports. It develops you. It really helps you have perseverance, persistence, and you don't give up. So that was my childhood. Then I went to a corporation. I was a CFO and treasurer of Coulter Corporation. That was the company that was number one for 60 years. Even 10, 15 years after Wallace's passing, the company was number one. He built the market. There was no market. He built a product. There was no product. That's what you call owning the market. It's not just 23% like an Apple or 50% like another product. It's when you have 99.99%, because the lawyers won't let me say 100%. So, and this company helped develop some values. Because when I went into the foundation, one of the first things I did in reference to the census was we distributed to over 150, 200 community-based organizations immediately. And people said to me, "How did you come up with the idea regarding getting the money out to these grassroots organizations?" And I said, "Well, I came from Coulter. We had the most powerful distribution organization of all healthcare. So working with all these ethnicities and cultures was nothing new to me. In fact, that was my responsibility. I carried that from corporate. Other things was the recognition that all the cultures and all the ethnicity and all the languages made the company bigger and better and richer and brought diversity in our thinking, in our decision making, in our growth. The other thing that's really important, if you ever have a chance to work in private industry, please do so. A private company is so much different than a public company because you know why? They really, really care about the customers and they really care about the employees. As an example, the company was owned by two brothers. I was a trustee of both brothers' trust. When one passed away and the other one I knew was at healthcare danger and risk, we had to sell the company before Wallace passed away. Therefore, what we did was pretty unique, I guess. We left $100 million at the table at the point of sale. That's my mother and my father. Okay, that's my rest of my clan. We call it the Van Clan. And this is the company. These are all the distribution organization. The company was 40 years old. His younger brother passed away from prostate cancer. This is Wallace Coulter, the benefactor. So when the sale took place, his proceeds from the sale became the corpus for the foundation. That's our acquisition in Japan, as you can see. Okay, so grow into the foundation. I had many programs in the foundation when I opened it in 1998. One of them was a translational research and biomedical. We've been very fortunate. It's probably the biggest translational research program in the United States in academia, which means we take inventions and innovations from the academic laboratory and we help to get it through the academic pipeline and commercialize it for the patients. So far, we started the program in 2005. So far, we've got about 20 products in the market today and over $3 billion in exit strategy with strategics and venture capital. As an example, for the women in the room, when older women get pregnant, they have to go through an amniocentesis test, which is a long needle. Two of our researchers invented a blood test. You no longer have to have it invasive, and there's no longer a risk to the fetus. So our program was designed to meet an unmet clinical need, which means that we change the practice of medicine. The other program is that we provide risk capital to biomedical organizations to take the best of their scientists, their researchers, and to take that education to overseas. So we were the first that brought the Society of Hematology, Society of Chemistry, and all of these organizations to China, to Latin America, and we are giving away free books regarding the quality control in a clinical laboratory. Because if you don't have quality and control, you don't have good health care. So the program, how did we wind up doing a program that's Wallace? Since you can't come to the foundation, I thought I'd bring the foundation to you. We have a very nice collection of jade that Wallace kind of fell in love with, and he was in China. We have a tropical fruit farm. In the summer, we have 50 varieties of mangoes, longans, lychees. So when people come and deliberately visit me in the summer, I know why. Okay. When I started the university, this is my staff. We only have 12 people. We only had 13 and one retired. So we only have 12. So I have a very small bureaucracy. So just for information, for those of you who may go to the Smithsonian and the Museum of Natural History, American Museum, the first floor has been renovated. It's called the American Business Enterprise. They talk about innovation, invention, and entrepreneurism. Wallace is featured there. So if you should go over there, go get yourself counted. It won't tell you how much weight you have, I promise. So why, with all of that, I want to explain to you, I come from industry. I come from a company who was number one for over 60 years. I say to people, I don't know how to be number two, and I hope everybody else feels the same way. So why do we focus on civic engagement? Because this community does not vote. You think it would, you think it should. So when I did not get into this till basically November 2nd, 2009. It's now an infamous date, and the person that's responsible is in this room. His name is Stuart Kuo. So if Stuart and I had not met November 2nd, this foundation would not be investing in this community, and this foundation would not be supporting this community, hopefully to a higher level. When I met him, I said, okay, you got 4 hours to teach me everything there is to know about this community. Okay? So give me one question. I said, what is the most important thing that you would like for me to know? What is your one wish at the wishing well? He said, the census. So for your information, the Coulter Foundation was the only funder for the 2010 census in the country because no one else funds this community. And what does that really mean? Because now what it means is now you hear all the time that the Asian American Pacific Islander, quote, is the biggest, fastest growing community. You would not have known that because it was a shock to everybody. It was a shock to the community. It was a shock to the Hispanics, Latinos. It was a shock for the whole United States. Nobody expected the Asian American Pacific Islander to be the fastest growing minority. So if we had not funded it, and therefore to get an accurate count, we would not be knowing that. But the problem is, so why is Coulter funding civic engagement? And why did we decide in 2014 that we would support comprehensive civic engagement and had that be the main focus going forward? Because even though the Asians contribute about 1.5 in consumer Buying power doesn't matter. The fact that we provide jobs doesn't really matter. The fact that we have so many of our people in very high academic positions, entrepreneurs, venture capital, creating jobs, it kind of doesn't matter. Because at the end of the day, there's still a bamboo ceiling, and the leadership, as many of you people talk about, you still have barriers to the corporate office. So, why is that? Like I said, that was the picture of the Chinese in the gold mine. That's the Chinese in the transcontinental railroad, which were asked to come over to build it. I think most history books will say that without the Chinese, there would not be a transcontinental railroad. However, if you have a picture of people that worked on the railroad, you don't see a Chinese face or an Asian face, and they're never there. And whenever you hear of a problem, the Rodney King situation was here. And where were all the policemen? They weren't in that area. They were in Beverly Hills. Okay. The Chinese migrant practically riot and people, you don't see people in reference to police or enforcement helping out the Asians or the Chinese. So why is that? Why is it that, quote, we were invisible, we have no voice, we have no seat at the table? I heard that from Stewart in 2009. I hear it today. And I think this community has been saying it for 20, 30 years. So why is that? Okay, how do you vote to begin with? What is civic engagement? Well, first you have to start with citizenship. You can see where the Asian Americans are 66% of the eligibility in reference to becoming citizens. The second gap is voting. You have to get registered before you can vote. The Asian American Pacific Islander community is the lowest at 56%. In 2012, this latest data, we're talking about the rate of registration and new voters. If you look at all of these, that's breakdown of the Asian American Pacific Islanders, the Hmong, which are only 265,000 people, and among the poorest in the Asian community, are the most organized, and they turn out the most in reference to voting. The Japanese, with their history of incarceration during World War II, have the second highest turnout rate. And then you go Indian, Vietnamese, Korean, Filipino, and Chinese. So the Chinese are only 2 levels above the Southeast Asian community that don't have the resources, haven't been here as long, and have the success rate economically as the Chinese. So you look at all of these, I think it is fairly known that probably the Chinese community, maybe because they've had decades of opportunity, because they have had people that go to the best schools or so forth, have had time to develop their economic contributions. But their voting performance is way down there. And that's across the board. That's our seniors. But the surprise to me were the college-educated, the professional that don't vote. Our youth. We're in the middle, 37%. But look at the African American population, how their youth turns out. So, how do we get visible? How do we get a voice? And how do we get a seat at the table? We can complain all we want for the next decade, because unless we do this, we are not going to get those areas corrected. So we have a 25% gap in citizenship. We have a 50% gap in registration, and we have a 27% in reference to turnout. So it has become Coulter's core program that we are going to support full, comprehensive civic engagement, starting from citizenship all the way to getting out to vote. However, unless and until we have more partners in reference to funding, because the foundation world does not fund this community. And maybe they don't fund this community because they don't think this community cares about American civic participation. Maybe they think that we are the model minority and don't need their money. But they also know that we really don't give back in reference to participation, because otherwise we wouldn't have such low rates. So how do we do better? We have to focus on areas of geographic concentration. We have to make sure that our community also cares about the candidates who run and their positions, which will help the community. And we have to certainly work with other groups. The Asian American Pacific Islander community is 20 million. I want you to know that my own personal transformation, as I said, I didn't grow up with this community. I don't really understand all the issues of the community. I don't agree with half of the positions of this community. So why do I fund? Because nobody else does. But it's really, really important for us to understand that without working with the Latino community, without working with the African American community, we'll never make it anyway. Because even if we got every single person, child, women, senior, youth to vote, we're only 20 million to begin with. So we have to have partnerships with other coalitions. And here's the power of coalitions. The civil rights movement in the United States would not have succeeded without a huge amount of white support, Latino support, and Asian support. And in order for us to get to that voice, to get to that seat at the table, I realize now, after 5 years of investing in this community, that we're not going to do that unless we vote. So I'm asking this, especially the next gen, because of all the things that you can impact and of all the things that you can contribute to, please do understand that the people who can deliver the citizenship, the voter registration, the voter education, and getting out the vote is the community-based organizations around your area, around your state, around the country. They're the ones who spend weekends and nights. They register and enrolled all the people who didn't have insurance when Obamacare came out. They're the ones who are doing the registration. They're the ones doing the door knocking. They're the ones doing the phone banking. We have to support them because they're not going to get supported by anybody else anyway. So it's really important that as a community, because we are in a better shape perhaps, because we've been luckier than most, because we're in good positions, because we can make economic contributions. As like Walter said, you have to think about what you can give back. I will say to you that we can do better in civic engagement, that we can get a voice, we can get a seat at the table, but it takes every single person to go out there to vote. That's how important it is. So let me say to you the two missions of C100. Yes, I think that there is no other organization that can deal regarding building bridges and ensuring that dialogue gets open and stays open regarding Greater China and the US. And China is not going to get weaker. It will get stronger and stronger. And every single time there's economic competition, political competition, military perceived threats regarding the cybersecurity issues, we are at risk. The Chinese Americans, the Asian Americans are at risk. There will be hate crimes, and don't think because there's hate crimes against the Muslims that it can't happen to us, because it does happen. And it has happened around the country. So, and the other mission of the C100 where it says full inclusion regarding Chinese Americans in the American society, that's not going to happen unless we do better in the listing of the Chinese Americans and the Asian American community, because it's like someone said, we don't use the word Asian in Asia, we only use it in America. And in America, we're part of this community. We're part of the Asian American community. And if we are going to succeed the Chinese Americans, then let us lead. Let us lead, because the Chinese are 4.5 million of the Asian community. They are the biggest number. Then let us lead and let us drive toward full participation and full inclusion by participating in civic engagement in this country. And I think the more that we do that, then there will be respect. And then there will be a voice, a seat at the table. And then we can help ensure that dialogue that China and the United States has to build, that the committee of C100 will be successful. Thank you.